Our first order of business is our discussion of the May minutes. Do anybody have any questions? Peter.
I have one correction which I gave the secretary. The Aging Connecticut Summit is on Monday, October the 30th, and in the minutes it was a wrong date.
Fair enough.
So if you make that correction, that'd be fine.
Great. Any other modifications to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as modified by Peter? Thank you, Susan. Second? Thank you, Mary. All in favor? Great. We'll move on to our Mather Center report. Beth?
I have copies of the July newsletter here, if anybody would like to take one. There's a couple good weeks left to do June and lots of programming to still come, but July is booked really full, so wanted to make sure we got this out as early as we could. Caitlin is hitting the ground running. We're on Facebook now, where we were not previously, and we're able to get out our newsletter and our constant contact now right on time. We also have been able to look at our policy, our guidelines, because we're going to do our first membership renewal. For the last 3 years we have not, so we're going to be doing that. And our instructor policies have been brought up to date as well. And it was funny just talking to Jerry, and Jerry knows the center. Caitlin tried to make this a little clearer to people. On this side of the page is everything that happens every single day of the week. Regular programs. So there's no articles written about those except in our constant contact. Sometimes we want to highlight, did you know we had? So you'll see that for those of you who have email, you'll see those kind of updates on the regular. But on this side is always the monthly specials. And that's really what the newsletter is written about, is all the things that are different every single month. So you can see that it's always very full. But that's where the basic information comes from. So if you're looking at the newsletter and you get a little confused, it's understandable. Usually when people are new, they come in. I always say, this is what happens every day, and this was happening this particular month. So our goal is to get the newsletter out at least 2 weeks previous to the next month. I think that's working out better. Our sign-ups are out for that portion of time as well. The lunch program, just to let you know, is building and building. It's averaging about 35 people a day with no events, which is bigger than we were prior to COVID. With events, it's anywhere from 50 to 80 at this point. It's really up to when we want to kind of stop it. And also there's all the entertainments that are out there now are just amazing. There's during COVID, I don't know whether people were bored and they got together and they hooked up with other musicians, but they're basically standing ovation programs. They're just so good. So July 7th, the next one that's coming is our Alumni Swing Band, which is from our wonderful Jim Carter, Middlesex music teacher. He gets together all the music teachers in the area that are either retired or still music teachers, and they put on a performance. They go from place to place in the summer. So they're back with us. So that's going to be our Independence Day celebration. So if anybody wants to sign up for it, the sign up's there.
Awesome.
Yep.
Any questions for Beth? Hearing none. Thanks so much, Beth. Allie?
Over here.
He is over there. Thank you. Oh, where'd she go? There she is. Allie, Human Services report. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Not too much new to report. Renter's rebate is well underway, and Cynthia's been busy with that. Everyone's eager to get their appointments in right at the beginning, but we have till September, and no matter when you apply, you still get the check at the same time of year, which is the end of October, so we have to kind of pace everybody because it's time consuming for her. But so plenty of time for that. You have until September 7th. We're offering another mental health first aid training to the public on August 1st and 3rd. It's free. It's used by ARPA funds. And that's for anybody. It's not just for parents with young children. And we're all affected one way or another with mental health issues or family, friends. And everyone who participated has said it's been wonderful. So again, it's August 1st and 3rd. Both days are from 8:30 to 1 at Post 53. And you can just email me and if you want to sign up. And then we have one protective service case that actually is going to be going to probate court for an involuntary conservatorship. Those are very tough because we get involved in the hearings and then we're working closely with Chris and At Home in Darien to try to help this lady until we get her to that point. So thank you to all you guys and all your flexibility and really going above and beyond trying to help this woman until she gets the help she needs. So, That's about it. Our loan closet is just like in high demand. It's great. I guess the word's out there. It's like almost every single day we have somebody coming or donating. So it's a great service that we have, and I think people are finally really taking us up on it. So don't forget. So we have walkers, transport chairs. Those are the two most famous. We're not famous. The most popular. And then what we've seen a lot of people using are the knee scooters recently. A lot of people having knee surgery and then they temporarily need it, and people love to get rid of it. So we take donations too. We don't take donations of things like commodes or shower chairs unless they're brand new because of hygiene purposes. But anyway, so don't forget about that great resource.
Thank you. Any questions for Ally? Hearing none, thanks so much. So our main topic of the meeting goes back to April, when Sue asked us to discuss the Connecticut Aid and Dying bill. We postponed that to today because we had Stephen Mulvaney coming in May. So here we are today. As you saw in our agenda, we're actually focusing on this particular bill. It's way too broad, okay, to talk about euthanasia in general, physician-assisted suicide, et cetera, et cetera. So we're focused on this bill. So I just want to give the provisions of this particular bill before we start the discussion. And then what I'm going to do is be quiet and go around the room to see if we have any consensus on this bill, okay, with respect to how we might support it. As you'll see from the agenda, it was passed by the Public Health Committee, but then died itself in the Judiciary Committee and did not reach a vote on the floor of the House. So here are the provisions of this bill. First of all, it has to be an adult age 21 or older, terminally ill with a prognosis of 6 months or less to live, mentally capable of making an informed healthcare decision. The individual must be able to self-administer the medication. Self-administration does not include administration by an IV injection or an infusion by any other person, including the doctor, family member, or patient themselves. 2 physicians must confirm the person is terminally ill with a prognosis of 6 months or less to live, mentally capable, and not being coerced. A terminally ill person can withdraw their request for medication and not take the medication once they have it, or otherwise change their mind at any point. The intending physician must inform the requesting individual about all of their end-of-life care options, including hospice and palliative care. Medication cannot be prescribed until mental capacity to make a healthcare decision is confirmed by a licensed mental health specialist. And physicians who participate and comply with all aspects of this law are given civil and criminal immunity. However, hospitals and other places which do not wish to be involved in this, and you can think of which institutions would not wish to be involved in this, do not have to participate. That's the basics of this law, which proponents call aid in dying, which opponents call physician-assisted suicide. And obviously it is a highly contentious issue. 10 states in the United States have it, including the District of Columbia. Many others have rejected it, including New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. The closest place to us is Vermont that currently has it. Started out in 1998 in Oregon. Okay? So you now have the basics of this particular bill, which we believe will come up again in substance, as it has for almost the past 20 years, in the Connecticut General Assembly next year.
22 years.
22 years, thank you, Peter. So as a result, it has been raised and rejected 22 consecutive years, and we will see where it goes from here. But today is the day for the Commission on Aging to discuss it, and again, I'm going to go around the table, so you're free to say, you know, a pass, like you would in an exam room, or you can speak. So, Tom, you're up first. Would you like to speak to this bill?
I'm against it.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Fair enough. Thank you. Peter?
I'm also not for it, personally for religious reasons, and again, I think there are probably hundreds of thousands of us that would be against it for religious reasons. It was interesting, I was up in Hartford last week, and Joe can certainly speak more to this, and I was talking to some experts in this area, and they said the real opponents of this legislation are those people that represent handicapped people. It's a real problem with them, anybody that's impaired, because again, it's a loss of control, which I hadn't thought of. Globally, even if it were to become law, I get, the thing is, the slippery slope issue. And I'll give you just one example of that slippery slope issue. So in Europe, we've had aid dying before. Right now, in the Netherlands and Belgium, there's a hot debate. Older adults who experience their lives to be completed and no longer worth living are now saying, I also am entitled for assisted suicide. In other words, these are people that are healthy, but in their own individual mind, they feel that their life is over and they should be able to have take their lives in some medically induced supervised fashion. So, bottom line, I'm not for it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Susan?
I think my thoughts are a little less absolutely yes, absolutely no, a little more nuanced. I would not, let me just state, I would not want this commission to take a position on this bill. I come to it more from I'm uncomfortable with this bill. And I was thinking about it over the last month or so as to why I'm uncomfortable. And I think it relates more to whether this is something that should be legislated. And I understand that physicians take risk and we're trying to protect physicians who are going to do this, but I liken it more to it's a little libertarian streak in me that, similar to the abortion issue. You know, I don't want the state involved in this decision. And I understand that's not really what the state's doing. They're trying to say, you know, we're protecting physicians from liability if they participate. As I said, I'm just uncomfortable enough to state that I don't think it would be a great idea for this commission to take a public commission or public position. If this passed, would I be marching at Hartford in opposition to it? Absolutely not. But I'm not comfortable having us take a position.
Fair enough, thank you. Sue?
This has been on my radar for a while because my brother's first wife had terminal cancer and suffered extremely. She spent most of COVID in New York City at an apartment going to Sloan Kettering with her new husband trying to work her way through this, and she ultimately she lives in New Jersey, which also has a law that allows it, and she planned her passing and had a very, everyone who was there were very heartened by the whole experience after she'd gone through what she had gone through. And so and then this, what reinvigorated my thoughts on it is this article in the New York Times. I brought some copies, I don't know if anyone saw this, which is about the woman who ultimately did go to Vermont. And Vermont is now accepting people who would like to go down this path. And it just seems to me that we should give people that option right here in Connecticut. It certainly isn't for everyone, and I wouldn't even want to to even try and influence or persuade anyone who didn't feel comfortable with it. But when I did look, I printed out this law, the proposed law, or the bill, I should say, and went through it all. It is all very clearly defined as to what aid and dying is, what the attending physician is, what competent is, what the counseling involved. It is very specifically careful about making it all very well defined, which makes me feel like everybody is protected. And I just feel I don't care whether this commission takes a position one way or the other. It just seemed to me that it should be discussed because it's we're the Commission on Aging, and this is something that, everyone who is aging could be facing. And we did have a League of Women Voters speaker, I should have looked up the fellow's name, an actor from Westport who spoke to us a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at our annual meeting, whose wife was terminally ill, who was an advocate and spoke at a number of places, encouraging people to get behind this because his wife had suffered so, and it would have been a lot easier for them as a family to have had this option. But those are my thoughts. Also, as you point out, 10 states do have this. Evidently 10 are considering it, including New York. So we're among those that are considering it too. Anyway, those are my thoughts. It just seems to me it should be out in the open, and more people should be thinking about it.
Fair enough. Marcy?
Well, I think I would pass on this as far as us taking a position. But I think it's very interesting that you brought it to the commission, because it's something that I really haven't even thought about. I didn't realize the states that have it. But I can see the complexities of it, the religious problems. I think it's family decisions personally, like you said, with abortion.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I think physicians are going to opt out. I don't know. I just would rather take a pass on it as far as commission. I think I would like to read some of the article, but I'm passing right now.
Fair enough. Jerry?
Well, okay, so I've worked in ministry for 35 years, and I've worked in the hospital, I've worked in nursing homes, and I've dealt with people with death and dying. I also worked with the girls that were in the hospital, the CNAs, and the administrators, talking about death and dying. I think that I've seen more in a hospital and in hospice, because sometimes people think with hospice, like if they sign in for hospice, that their families are going to starve to death. And that's not the case with hospice. They make them comfortable, they still eat. And because of my experience with hospice and ministry and what you said, religion, I feel that it is the family's decision. I don't think I brought hospice in for my mother when my mother was so sick at the end of her life. I wouldn't have wanted to have my mother say to me, just end my life. That would really, that I had to say, this is what I have to do for my mother. I mean, that's just the way I feel. But I did bring hospice in. And I just feel like, I don't know, I think it's what you said, it's more of a family doctor. And that's what happens all the time. I'm dealing with someone now that's in Virginia that went to see her father, just to visit her father, and he's 92, and he was in the hospital, but he made a bad turn. And she's been talking to me from Virginia about her dad, and I said, you want comfort measures for your dad. That's all you want. But I mean, I don't think I want her dad to say, just end my life right now, just let me go. I said, tell him you love him, walk the journey with him. That's how it is in the hospitals. That's how it is in the hospital. But to say that I mean, it's part of living. I would not want to have, I don't think I'd want to be part of saying, let's have the assisted, and let's just let them make their own decisions. Some people can't make that decision, though, as a family. So you have to work through it with them. Like, I had to work through it with this woman who's in Virginia now. And now she finally sent me a note today saying, I've made the decision, I'm going in hospice. And I think that's what hospitals have. That's why they have the pastoral care departments. That's why they have, the interfaith, and they do that. So, I mean, I don't know if I want to be part of saying, yes, let's do it.
Fair enough. Thank you, Jerry. Mary?
Yeah.
I don't know about our representation in terms of, supporting or not supporting this particular bill. We do represent an aging population, so I'm thinking that maybe we should have some kind of communication about this in terms as a commission. But it might be that we are not going to deal with it, or, not going to take a stand, which is fine. I think we should discuss it in terms of that some more, and whether or not we're doing a disservice by not communicating this kind of information to our, not constituents, what do you call them? I mean, we're just people who are, advocating, I should say, for aging population. I think the bill is very comprehensive, and as far as I can see, I'm not a lawyer, but it looks like there's a lot of protection in there. It looks like, to me, there's a lot of, it has to be driven by the person who is making that decision. And to me, that's a personal decision, and I wouldn't stand in that person's way if that's what they wanted. I wouldn't be happy about it necessarily, but
That's a good point.
I think I would not stand in someone's way. If it was a relative or a friend or whatever, I would respect what they would choose to do. And I just don't think anybody can walk in those shoes without knowing, without having to struggle with that kind of decision or discussion or consideration. So that's the way I feel about that. And we are a representative kind of body, and so we have to consider this. I mean, we don't have to do anything today, but we have to consider whether we are responsible for getting information out to people.
I think if anybody reads the bill, you realize how careful they are to make sure that this isn't misused, that it's only the individual's decision. They're counseled, they've got to write 2 different letters and wait 6 months. It's a very tight procedure, and certainly any family should be doing, not really the family, it's the individual, what they wish. But I do think Connecticut should give their citizens the option of going down this route if that's what they choose to do. That's all that it, nobody's suggesting that anyone choose this option if they aren't interested. It's a free will choice.
Fair enough. On my own, personally, I have been an advocate for bills of this nature. However, as chairman of the Commission on Aging, I try to find consensus on what we support and where we put our gunpowder, right? Mm-hmm. It's very clear from this discussion, we do not have consensus on this question. So what I would say is, whatever your personal feelings about this, pro, con, or whatever, make sure your voice is heard. In other words, this will be heard again in the next legislative session, and you'll have the opportunity to testify either in person or via video. I can tell you, to Peter's point, I cannot tell you how difficult it is to be an advocate for this when you're following someone who is physically challenged, who is saying you're trying to kill them. Okay, mm-hmm. And and I have to sit there and go, no, absolutely not. There are so many restrictions to this, but I also recognize that's really hard. And to Peter's other point, there's a massive slippery slope here. That is, under the terms of this bill, I love it. Okay, but I can see absolutely how many ways this could go wrong. As they say, once the camel's nose gets under the tent, right? In other words, we've seen in Canada that they've expanded it. We've seen in Europe they've expanded it. The line that's really most important in demarcation, to my mind, is aid in dying, being the person has to be physically able to take what will take them out, versus a physician actually taking them out. That's the Jack Kevorkian death machine, okay? And the problem is, in Europe and in Canada, they've gone way over that line to the point where there is a huge potential undue influence problem, which is whether it's the physicians telling people, hey, do you really want to live like this? Or the family telling them, hey, do you really want to live like this? That you have a potential undue influence problem. So as long as we stay within that aid in dying medication thing, I'm an advocate and will continue to be an advocate, but only in my personal capacity, not as chairman of the Commission on Aging, which I make very clear whenever I testify.
I have a question of, because the way I look at this, it's more of, this is, I think, about the physicians more than anything else. And I would be, not that I think this happens, but I wonder if it does without it ever being brought to light. And I look at this as more as like protecting the physicians who might, feel freer to do this. And I'm just curious, is the local medical associations, or have they taken a position on
Will
this?
not take it. They will not take it publicly for a lot of
Not
reasons.
publicly. Well, first of all, the Hippocratic Oath.
Right, Hippocratic Oath is a big issue, right?
Yeah.
Do no harm, and so many feel that this is doing harm. You cannot do it, right? It's a very hard line,
Yeah.
right? So I have no doubt that people are helped along by their physicians. The classic example is an overdose of morphine.
Well, I was just thinking about that.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right. Right, the
Yes.
principle of double effect. If you're
Right.
trying to kill off pain, you may kill off the patient, right? In other words, and so if somebody is that far along and the family agrees, that occasionally happens. Always on the QT though, okay, because of the physician liability issue of,
Right.
wait a minute, why don't you give that person that much morphine, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's gonna always be the issue on the side. The issue is, and obviously the commission has no consensus on this question, on whether you feel, but I do think from individually, especially for those of us who feel strongly one way or another, it is important to have your voices heard,
Yeah.
to contact people and talk about it, and so it'll be interesting to watch going forward for sure.
Joe, here's a question for you. As I read through
Yes.
this, a couple things, and I agree that this is really kind of meticulously laid out, but maybe I'm looking at it literally, but page 5, towards the bottom, starting on line 136, it's talking about the request for medication and kind of like a will. If the progression of such condition follows its typical course, typical to me is an absolute.
No, there's no absolutes in this. You're correct.
So that just is something I looked at, I said, that's a little concern. And then on line 154, it says, I understand that I have the right to rescind this request at any time, which is great, and people change their mind.
Right.
I don't know the means that they do this, but once it's started, can they change?
Oh yeah, this is just to get the pills. So this is what's happening in Oregon. It's a
But I'm
great
saying,
question.
once they take a pill.
Oh, once they take it, it's over.
Okay, so, and they
This is
change
to
their mind.
get, this is to get the pills, right?
Okay.
You write
Okay.
those things to get the pills, and then the question is, when do you take them? And what's interesting is in Oregon, I forget the percentages, but it's quite high. I think it's 64% of people who have requested the medication actually don't take it. So because they want the control. If I'm ever in this position, I want to be able to do this. And they don't actually take it. They die of natural means. So at the end of the day, the long story short is, from my perspective again, that there are lots of protections in here. But, okay, there is a massive slippery slope argument which makes it really, really challenging to say, okay, where does Connecticut go in 2034? Where is Connecticut in 2044? Where are we once you open this door, right? And so that is my biggest concern, is that not that this particular bill will result in an innumerable number of deaths, especially of disabled people, but that someday it might be the leaning indicator of a more aggressive form of euthanasia, which we've seen already in Canada and in Europe. So, other discussion? Yeah.
I just want to say that we're going to be looking at actually having more discussions on what hospice is, what palliative care is, what advanced directives are. It's a little different when you're a 95-year-old who's not thriving anymore and has open wounds and is in horrible pain, losing your compensation and your ability to make decisions. And I think there's a misnomer with what hospice is and what palliative care is. Because even hospice, you're not allowed, even with the morphine thing now, to give any more than a certain dosage anyway. What happens is the reason why people pass when they're pain managed is that they're decompensating. So the more that they're decompensating, that drug becomes a little bit, same dose, but becomes a little bit more powerful just based on the fact that either your kidneys are in total failure, you don't have the pulmonary strength you had before. So there is not a lethal dose that hospice ever gives. I just want to make that clear. But there's a very big difference between someone very old in a facility as they're being made comfortable for palliative care and hospice care. They would never be given a lethal injection. But I think people need to know what palliative care is and what hospice care is, so that they feel a bit more comforted when these things are called in, because it is natural death. There's no assistance of having, no pillows are put over anybody's face. Nobody, and no family gets any say in it. Now, I will tell you what people don't understand about advanced directives, because I just did it for my dad with my sister. And that was basically that he would not be transported to the hospital, and for all these different reasons, unless he breaks a bone, because the bone they can fix. But everything else that's wrong with him, there's no fixing anymore. There's no surgical intervention for his heart anymore. He's really being kept alive by chemistry. So chemistry can keep you alive too, right? And he's being kept comfortable by chemistry. So it's good for people to have these conversations so that they understand we're not the ones that are, there's nobody controls our coming in or going out. Even people who make a cesarean date, it's still somebody else made that decision, not you. And the same thing with leaving the earth. But I just think that as part of this same discussion, we should make older people, especially with frailly older people, more comfortable that this is comfort care. That this is, and advanced directives, people should be talking about now. Even
Totally.
I just turned 65. We should be talking about advanced directives even now, so the conversation's out there. This bill, which is 22 years in the making, is much more substantive and specific than it ever was. And maybe it needs more time. That's why the conversation. But I think we need to have conversations also about death not being a failure, and death not being that that it's, if somebody gets out alive. So far, we only think one person did. So that there's a natural component to it too. So we're not always afraid, and that we can feel good about the span we had here, and going out isn't that we failed in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to be doing some programs like this. We actually found a gal who does eulogies. It's absolutely fascinating. I kind of vetted her, but I talked to Stanford, did it already. And she only does 8 people at a time, and you write your eulogy. Wow. She said there was more laughter coming out of that room. And to actually, because when people, don't let them say this about me, but that's another way of having control too. Do you want somebody to write an expose about your financial achievements and your whatever? No, even that's personal. So this is an extremely personal issue, but we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it, because we have so many options to stay alive now, and nobody can speak to somebody else's quality of life. Right. But just to let you know, in our nursing home experience is a little bit different, and at this particular point in time, not to be afraid of these things either.
Susan?
I just want to have this is all fascinating. I've had personal experience with a lot of this, particularly the morphine, and I have other experiences where, this is about control, and for the person who's dying to have control. I can count on one hand the number of times where I know older people who just stop eating, stop drinking,
Right.
and because they're ready.
Right.
And that, in a way, is also a form of control. This is just another form of control, but it has that other actor, the physician, and the pills, which makes it makes it much more active as opposed to passive control. So I think that's where, I like to say, this is much more nuanced than we actually think it is. This is not the only, like by not passing this bill is not the only way that someone who's dying has no control. But it's that active piece that troubles me.
I think to Beth's point is a really good one. Whatever you think about this kind of bill, to have your advance directives in place is just so critical. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, if you wish to have one. Those kind of documents for everyone, let alone seniors, are just so important because otherwise, going back to Ally's point, you're into a conservatorship into the probate court, which is a disastrous procedure. So having these kinds of documents in place for everyone is really, really critical, because then you can express what your wishes are relating to cardiopulmonary resuscitation, right? Artificial respiration, artificial nutrition and hydration. Those kinds of issues are actually stuff you can talk about and what you want and what you don't want. And just so it's a vital portion. So I'm glad you brought that around to that issue, because whatever we think about this particular bill, what we actually have, just people need to take advantage of to make sure their wishes are followed one way or another.
Sure.
And it's really people understanding, the hospice aspect of it. And it's nothing to be afraid of, and it's like even the feeding tubes. And as an example, I had a grandmother that passed away when she was in the hospital. And I'll never forget, my mother said to the doctor, no feeding tube, just let her go naturally. And I think that's all, and it's an uncomfortable subject,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but, talking about it, but I've been in it for so many years that I've seen it all. And when I see what they do with people, like Beth said, they have those directives, and the families work with hospice, and they work with the doctors. It's not as scary as you thought it would be, and I hear that all the time from the families, that it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, with the help of hospice or whatever way you want to leave here. So I don't know, I that was very good, Beth, about the advance directives too.
Other discussion?
I guess the only difference I think absolutely people stop eating, and there are, ways to, when one is ready. I think it doesn't factor in as much the pain that some people have that, makes all of that kind of even more difficult. But as I said right in the beginning, I just think it's something we need to discuss and get out there, and not try and persuade anyone one way or the other, but just to have a discussion about what makes more sense for our state and our seniors.
Other discussion? Hearing none, thank you so much for an informative, and what I love about our commission is open, honest, non-attack form, because on issues like this, they can get really hot and contested very quickly. So it's great to see that even on a very difficult topic like this, that we can have a really good discussion. Thank you. Great. Old business, I'm going to turn it over to my man Chris. What's going on at At Home in Darien?
Okay, well, boy, after that subject, I'm going to talk about what we're doing to keep seniors at home as long as possible. Yeah, a couple things real quick. Our Out and About, our 3 times annual Out and About went into mailboxes last week. If you haven't received it, I've got copies here, we've got copies in the office. We're actually talking about maybe doing it a 4th time online, which would be interesting. But it coincides with, it's the annual report issue, and it coincides with our annual appeal, which goes out, and we continue to be very fortunate to be really primarily funded by the community, which is, to me, amazing. A couple of things very important that we're doing now. We've got a vetted service program, which has a couple of different iterations, but we have seniors who call in and they need a plumber, electrician. Increasingly, we're having conversations with sons and daughters who are out of town. Can you do this? I'm worried about this. So we've kind of changed some things around. John Keating, who's on our board, one of our board members, who's our vice president of services, he's a building inspector after his career on Wall Street. So what we've done, he and I have gone to the homes for some of these parents, and he's walked through completely, and I'm really impressed, the things that he identifies that are potential safety concerns, and then has a conversation either with the parents or with the children in terms of, here's, kind of the first tier of what needs to be done. We had done that before with an organization in Norwalk that stopped doing it. So we're going to come up with ways to really promote that and make people aware. It's free. We go over there. I learn, I go over there to represent at home, and John goes through and so it's really great service. And we need to add to the list of service providers that we have. So anybody in this room, if there's somebody, Peter has done it in the past, if there's somebody that you've worked with, you're particularly fond of, let me know, and we can look at bringing them on board, because it continues to be, and I know Peter's talked about this a number of times, it continues to be a really important service for our seniors. And then the one other thing I want to talk about is through our membership, we have relationships, I would say, with 29 different businesses in town that provide special discounts for members of At Home in Darien. And I've seen an increased usage, and Palmer's on there, Cafe Nero, a whole slew of businesses. I think that's only scratching the surface. So we have 29, certainly with new restaurants and ice cream shops coming into the developments, we want to add to that. So I will be going and working with the team to reach out to the community. Again, if you have any thoughts, if you have any connections with some of these local businesses, we would love to add them on it. Again, it really means a lot to the seniors. And thank you, the loan closet, I haven't had a term for that, but we have people who call us. A woman called yesterday, and I think hopefully she called you. Her mother's coming to town. She doesn't want to bring a rollator or a walker on the plane, so she wanted to see if
She's coming today.
So it's the loan closet. So now I have a term for that. And I say this every time, but what Ally does and our team, the situation we're dealing with is just phenomenal, and again continues to differentiate Darien from really any other town. So thank you, John.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Hearing none. Thank you so much. Other old business. Anything going on, Peter?
Yeah, I've got a couple things, Joe. I was going to give you an update on the end of the legislative season, but from here I'm going to Berlin, Connecticut for an update session, actually.
I thought Berlin,
Where are you
Berlin, Connecticut. And I'll give you a report on that next month. But I do want to mention a couple of AARP-related things. The second half focus of AARP this year is going to be very intense and singular subject, and that's going to be Social Security. We're going to see a lot coming out focused on Social Security. Also, they've developed a lot of, I think, really great new material. Here's a financial workbook for caregivers, and it is the most comprehensive one I've seen that deals with you as a caregiver working with someone, laying out a roadmap for the person you're taking care of in great detail. And they've got one geared especially now for health benefits navigators for veterans. Okay, so putting this together, and again, there's going to be some work in this area. And then they also do a lot of, as you know, online programs, and I saw one for this coming Friday, Movies for Grown-Ups, which again, you don't have to be an AARP member. It's online, you go register. But this one, it's a documentary film that places a human face on the hidden epidemic of chronic loneliness and social isolation, made especially acute by the COVID pandemic. Built on hope, it shares the latest research and interventions for individuals and communities, and leaves audience feeling empowered and reconnected. It sounds like it's a great film, and again, we should get the word out on things like this, and again, see how we can use this with At Home in Darien, Matter Center.
is it streaming?
Yeah. and you can just go and register for it.
Maybe the library would be interested in doing a,
Good thought, yeah.
doing
I'm showing it.
yeah.
So that's ARP. The other thing I want to talk about, two other things. One came over the transom last night, actually, and on July the 4th at 9:30 at the Darien High School, there's going to be a Declaration Day ceremony. So there's going to be a ceremony, 25 minutes long, focused on the Declaration of Independence. Terry Woods is a player in this, as is Jamie Stevenson and our Monuments Committee. And Chris, they sent you information,
I got that
last
right
night,
into our calendar,
so we can
yeah.
get it out for at home in Darien and the Mather Center. But this is, I think we've done this before. I don't know, those of you that have been in town a long time, but I think it's a hell of an idea. I mean, so take a look at the Declaration of Independence, and in 30 minutes, with kids' help, music, celebrate it and talk about what's important to us. So,
What time is that?
it's 9:30
At EHS?
at the high school in the courtyard. Yeah, and they're going to have seating for it.
So is it a play or a reading
No,
of the
it's
Declaration?
the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission. They're going to read the whole thing, from my understanding, and talk about it. They're going to talk about
Okay.
veterans, names of the veterans, and just talk about the importance of the aspects of the Declaration of Independence.
Great. That was awesome.
The last thing I want to speak about is the Aging in Connecticut Summit. And again, let me give you, I have some copies which I'll leave here. Let me give you again a little bit of a background, particularly maybe for those of you watching on channel. In 1973, the United States Older Americans Act specified that every state have commissions on aging, agencies on aging in every state. And every state has done it somewhat differently depending on the geographical, the population, the demographics. And our state has 5, okay? And the one that we are most knowing about, most comfortable with is SWACA, the Southwestern Connecticut. But there are 4 others. And for the first time, I guess in more than 10 years, there's going to be a statewide program looking at aging, okay? And they're expecting about 300 to 400 people, and it's up in Plantsville, and here's a preliminary flyer on it. And I just want to talk about one aspect of it. So as a advisory council member to SWACA, I volunteered to serve on one of the panels. And our panel is the Housing in Connecticut, the View from Here. So there's going to be a panel looking at housing in Connecticut. It's going to be moderated by Ginny Monk, who's one of the Connecticut Mirror's reporters. And we're going to have 4 presenters on it. And the whole purpose of this program really is to provide overviews and get people thinking about what needs to be done. And the areas that we've come up with for housing is public and private partnerships in support of housing. And that's going to be New Samaritans Corporation. New Samaritans Corporation is a not-for-profit organization that works with housing cooperatives around the state and provides them with help and guidance in dealing with senior issues. The second one is a role for social innovators, and it's something called Nesterly, Nesterly. And I'd encourage you to go to nesterly.com and see about it. It's a program that started in Massachusetts, and what it essentially does, it pairs young people up with people living in their homes, and maybe provide them with a little bit of assistance. It's a great program. It's fascinating. And again, it could be a program of the future. So that's the second one. The third one is the Fair Housing Center, the advocates. Knowing how many people today are getting kicked out of their homes by foreclosures, knowing that we're 20,000 housing units in the state short, what are the legal protections? The final element, as we built this program, and I was working with Margaret McIntyre, who is Central, is it?
Yeah.
Central Connecticut. Yeah. And she's been working on heading this up, and I've been working. I said to her, we don't really have a vision of what happens in a community. And so there's going to be business development and community vision. And some guy named David Genovese is going to be on this program. And I'm hoping he brings his mom, because Jerry, I think, can provide a unique perspective sitting on this commission. But I had some fascinating conversations with him, and he said he's discovered a new acronym. Okay, and the new acronym is NORC. N-O-R-C. NORC. Anybody know what NORC stands for? Naturally occurring retirement communities.
Oh, yeah, I have heard that.
Right, and you've heard it before, and it's out there, but it's building. And David was saying that his work in the development, what he's been doing is, this has been in a way a revelation to him as we look at how our town is being reconfigured, both as a housing and a living area, that there may be some unique opportunities again to reinforce the intergenerational nature of our community as it's seen in housing. So that's the program that we're working on. And again, I'd encourage you to think about it, share the information. If you know somebody that could benefit, get them to attend.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter.
That's it.
Appreciate it. Any other old business? Any new business? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn the June meeting of the Commission on Aging? Anybody? Or you want to stay here? Oh, thank you. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. See you in July.